Studies at the University of Kansas. She holds a PhD in political science from Purdue University, and she did international law from Moscow National Law Academy. And Maria's research and teaching interests include international and Eurasian security, counter-terrorism and human rights, democracy promotion in the post-Soviet territory, Russia's foreign and security policy, and terrorism crime nexus in Eurasia. And today Maria will talk about Islam as a power resource, instrumentalization of religion. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for your presentation. I'm very delighted to be here, and thank you to the Institute and to the Central Asian Program for inviting me and hosting me. I'm truly honored. I love DC, I like George Washington University, and thank you for joining me this afternoon for the talk. I know it's beautiful outside. It's May, end of the semester for those of you who are in school, so I really appreciate your time. Well, let me just go straight to what motivated me for this project. You know, for a long time, I've been sort of puzzled by this question about religion in general, not just about Islam. And this question is, how is it that religion, such as Islam, can be a source of unity and peace, but at the same time be a cause of enmity and conflict? How is that religion can provide motivation for life, for ethical and productive existence, sort of be a divine remedy for human suffering, but it can also serve as a catalyst for ostracism and defamation. And so probably everyone will agree that no other religion has received as much international attention as Islam in recent years, largely because of its very strong association with party identity differences that motivate conflict and that used to justify violence. So the broader question that the kind of broad question that is above the research that I am going to be presenting today that focuses on Central Asia asks, so how can religion in general, and Islam in particular, play multiple conflicting and contradictory political and social roles? And I like to make my answers known from the very beginning, so I'm going to kind of present some of my contentions or key assumptions that I'm operating under. My contention or my belief is that there is nothing inherently conflictual or peaceful about any kind of religion, be it Islam or Christianity. In other words, no religion possesses an intrinsic ability to endanger conflict or facilitate cooperation. However, religions, as a very complex systems of beliefs, lend themselves to the process that I call the instrumentalization of religion. And I didn't invent the term, I didn't coin it, I've borrowed it, and I've been using it. I've conceptualized it, I've rethought it, and I'm using it for talking about this phenomenon of the discursive use of what people believe religion is about. So instrumentalization is a deliberately discursive process of packaging references to religion with certain themes or emotional appeals for the purpose of accomplishing distinctive political goals. So we know that religion exists, we understand it, we can differentiate Islam from Christianity or Orthodox Christianity from Catholicism on the basics of, you know, what we think what religion is all about. So religion is a construct, just a system of beliefs that lend themselves to multiple interpretations, and those interpretations occur through discourse or discursive representations, and stakeholders use those various discursive representations, manipulate them for accomplishing distinctive political purposes and aims. And I will talk about this a little bit more in a minute. I'll dedicate a few minutes to kind of theory or the conceptual framework, if you wish. I will skip the discussion of Islam in Central Asia because I assume that the audience is pretty well aware that, you know, those are the countries with predominantly Muslim population. It's predominantly Sunni of Hanafi school of religious jurisprudence, etc., etc., etc. In my research, I focus on Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, again, just for the purpose of demonstrating, the process of the instrumentalization of religion, but I could have applied this framework to other Central Asian republics or any other Muslim state. So the two cases that I'm going to be talking about today is the instrumentalization of Islam in Kazakhstan and in Uzbekistan. And here is sort of a brief overview of what to expect. So as I promised, I'm going to start by talking just a little bit about the concept of instrumentalization and introduce you to the methodology of studying instrumentalization that I use in this study. And a bulk of this talk will focus on the results of the discourse analysis that I performed on the official rhetoric surrounding Islam by the governments of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. And then I've used this analysis of discourses for developing a framework that links various images, if you wish, or various discursive representations of Islam to their political uses. And I'll try to make a case for the usefulness of this framework in thinking about or theorizing the role of religion in social political life in general, or role of Islam in the relationships of Muslim, non-Muslim states, or Muslim communities and non-Muslim communities, etc. Okay? So, I will start with a little bit of theory or concept. I am a strong believer that we live in the world of constructs. Those are human rights, money, democracy, constitutionalism, parliamentarism, etc. Those are all constructs, right? And we perceive those constructs. It's not that we can touch them or measure them directly, but we perceive, we discern, we believe that they exist through our conversations about it. So in other words, most of the social phenomena are discerned through the language of discourse. The language of discourse is used to define and to create social phenomena like religion in public spaces. So language or discourse serves as the purveyor's meanings that allow us, the observers, in this case, to differentiate Islam from Catholicism from Christianity, etc., etc. Any religion, but Islam in particular, lends itself to multiple discursive representations. Why Islam in particular? Again, I'm not going to claim any kind of authority to interpret Islam, or I'm not a scholar of Islam, but, and those of you who are scholars of Islam, feel free to correct me or later in the Q&A or comment section. I would like to learn more about it. But based on my understanding, based on what I know, Islam lacks a hierarchical organization with a universally recognized leadership, like Catholicism or Orthodox Christianity do. So Islamic tradition does not vest the ultimate authority to mandate how the Quran or its ethical, political, and social injunctions should be interpreted in any one source. What it means is that there is this relative freedom in interpreting religious texts, and this freedom, or kind of opens up a room for manipulating Islam. This relative freedom of interpreting religious texts presents various groups and individuals with an opportunity to lay claims that those interpretations are the only authentic ones. And by claiming authenticity of their interpretations of religious scriptures, these same groups or leaders, sometimes secular leaders, also assert authority for defending the faith in itself and representing the Muslim community as a whole. Okay, and so that's kind of a unique aspect, a unique feature of Islam as an institutionalized religion that makes it different from like Catholicism or Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. So this intrinsic manipulability of Islam that allows stockholders to adduce their authority to represent Muslims and the faith itself also opens the opportunity to instrumentalize religion. And again, it's a deliberative discursive process that involves packaging the references to Islam with certain themes to various connotations, meanings, and emotional appeal. So just to give you an example, you have a secular government that utters security or danger when it speaks about Islam, or it couples Islamic references with reports of violence. In this way, creating an image of Islam as something that is threatening, that is something that is dangerous. Or you may have a government that presents Islam or certain Islamic beliefs as integral to the country's cultural tradition, culture's past history, and in this way the government can create an image of authentic, traditional, and largely apolitical religion, and the government can claim authority for protecting, defending this kind of apolitical, traditional, cultural Islam. And I'll give you many more examples as we move into the actual discourses by the Kazakh and Uzbek government. And why does it happen? Why is it happening? Why does religion get instrumentalized? Well, I don't think of myself as a Foucauldian, but I do share Foucault's view that power is pervasive, it's ubiquitous. You know, we cannot escape it. It is ever present in our social relations, especially political relations and religious relations. And but to maintain power, for power to survive and thrive, it has to be legitimized. And religion has always supplied the ready-made material for presenting and legitimizing old and new forms of authority, whether in secular or religious contexts. So religion has been turned into an ideology of sorts. So I'm not claiming that religion is ideology, but there are similarities between religion and ideology. So it has been turned into an ideology of sorts by the governing authorities and other stakeholders who seek to best legitimacy in their work, in their practices and their policies or words. And here is a quote that I really, really like. So the instrumentalization of Islam is used for the purpose of legitimizing the stakeholders' political interests in decisions. So instrumentalization as a discursive process represents a kind of soft power or world-making power because it provides those stakeholders with the ability to construct and impose the legitimate vision of the social world and of its divisions. So it's an important instrument of social control and regulation, short of use of brute force. Yes. Okay. So how do we study those discursive representations? And by the way, I'm a big fan of discourse analysis. So I've done a lot of analysis, lots of different analysis of different kinds of discourses, not just related to Islam. And in this tradition of discourse analysis, it's very common to discern those discursive representations from the actual language of written and verbal conversations about the issue. So those representations can be identified from the statements of the governments, from the transcripts of interviews, from anything that they say or write, and usually those utterances or publications are stored as texts that can be retrieved from various sources and then later analyzed. And so this is what I did. I analyzed a lot of, I should have probably given you a specific number. My initial study was spanned the period of 1997-2012, but in the past couple of months I updated it to all the way to 2015. So now I have a sample of pretty much all of the main addresses delivered by Nursultan Nazarbayev during this period of 1997 to 2015, and the same applies to Taribas. And those can be found on their official websites or through the websites of presidential administrations. For this talk, I will rely on English texts, but in the study I made sure to look at both English language and Russian texts of these speeches. In addition to these addresses and speeches, I mean, these courses are not limited to just what presidents say, even though I'm really interested in what the presidents say because of the nature of the regimes and the power, social power that these individuals have over their societies. I also analyzed thousands of news articles containing references to Islam published by non-US newspapers or newswires. So for example, Kazakhstan General Newswire, Central Asian News Services, Russia and CIA General Newswire, etc. And I've been using various softwares for qualitative content analysis. My original study used NVivo. At the most recent meeting of the International Studies Association, back in February in New Orleans, I got to know Provalis. Provalis is a Canadian company that specializes in developing text analytics tools combining quantitative and qualitative analysis. So WordStat and QDA Miner are the software that I used, and you will see some of the visuals from the application of those tools. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the actual discourse analysis, or results of the discourse analysis. And I know the fonts are tiny, but I'll show you different visual that will explain what's going on. So if you run, so we're going to look at discursive representations of Islam in Kazakhstan first, and then we'll move on to Uzbekistan. So if you just run all of the speeches and addresses through the software to see what kind of themes, what kind of terms are recurring or used more frequently. So I coded into the categories all of the terms that appear 50 times or more. And what this graph shows is that, well, Nazarbayev in his speeches is not really concerned much about Islam, because Islam appears all the way here, and the frequency is somewhere between like 160 and 170 times that this term, Islam, Islamic, and the synonyms are being used. It comes as no surprise that the Kazakh president has been mostly concerned with the government's performance and economy, Kazakhstan's position in international relations, its leadership potential. So it's about economy, government. It's those words like improve, regional cooperation, something about nuclear, etc. And this is another way of showing this graph. So this is a word cloud that shows again how prevalent certain themes or words in the discourse based on the size, and international economy development, government, citizens, improve conditions, create modern, progressive state. Those are the kind of themes that run like red thread through the speeches and addresses of the president of Kazakhstan. And Islam and Islamic, all things Islamic, are not really that common in the president's speeches. And overall, Nazarbayev kind of opted for superordinate concepts such as religion and faith as the substitute for Islam, and has always placed much more emphasis on secularism of his country, that Kazakhstan is modern, secular state. This is some of the quotes that represent how Sultan Nazarbayev would like the world and the citizens of Kazakhstan to think of the country. So we respect and nurture the best traditions of Islam and of other world and traditional religions, while we are building a modern secular state. So although we respect Islam, we cherish Islam, we embrace Islam, but we do so with regard to other religions as well, and we are building a modern secular state. So again, the emphasis is on modernity, being progressive, being secular. Kazakhstan is a secular state with a Muslim majority population. Or another interesting quote. Kazakhstan is a secular society with high spirituality. You know, so having said that, if you look comparatively, okay, if you look comparatively, Islamic appear more often in in Nazarbayev's speeches than in Karimov's, which is something that I didn't expect to see. But the themes or the contexts in which Nazarbayev versus Karimov use the theme of Islam vary. So, in the context of Kyrgyzstan, when Nazarbayev, or if we go outside of his speeches and look at the broader discourse, when Islam is used, it's used in one of the following contexts. So this is called a proximity plot, and it shows those terms which are more likely to accompany or be found next to references to Islam. And when the government of Kazakhstan talks about Islam, it is usually in the context of cooperation with not only states from the broader Central Asian region, but it is about the cooperation with the states of the Gulf states, the states of the Middle East, all other Muslim states. Okay, it is in the context of also regional cooperation, but that kind of cooperation is on security issues. It is in the context of it is in the context of, this is something that is consistent with kind of, Kazakhstan has been trying to present itself as a leader in the region, but the government has used the notion of Islam or references to Islam to portray Kazakhstan as also a leader on all Islamic questions. So it's a first Islamic hub, it's the first hub of Islamic business or Islamic finances in the region, for example. It's so the government of Kazakhstan has been trying to present the state as a new leader in the dialogue between Muslim countries and the West. That Kazakhstan has the so-called natural position for developing mutually beneficial relations among Muslim states and advancing the dialogue of civilizations. And interestingly, President Nazarbayev stressed the need for the Muslim community to modernize, pointing out at some of the Muslim states that are lacking in development, and even volunteered Kazakhstan's experiences and leadership to spearhead the process of modernization. Okay, so again, I don't take me wrong, I didn't just look at the stats. I actually went over each and every single article and quoted it in accordance with themes. So the cooperation with other Islamic states really come at the top. The Kazakh government has placed a lot of emphasis on that we are the leaders in fostering this dialogue between Muslim states and the rest of the world. That we are the leaders of Muslim business practices and financing in the region. That we are the leaders in the sense that we've been able to build a secular state that embraces Islam, the state that is progressive, that is modern, that is democratic, that respects other religions, provides citizens with religious rights, and so we are volunteering our experiences to others who are interested in using those. This is the kind of theme that is just dominating the discourse. Now, on the second place, I would say, comes the theme of the kind of Islam that is embraced and supported by the state. Okay, and this is the kind of Islam that is official, and it is the kind of Islam that is traditional. So this official and traditional Islam plays a unifying and modifying role in the Kazakh society. It is the kind of Islam, I quote the Kazakh president, this is forefathers Islam that exhibits a harmonious accord between the Islamic great teachings and traditions and customs of Kazakh. It is the kind of Islam that does not preach to take arms, fight, kill others, violate the law, or go against the state. Importantly, it is a kind of Islam that encourages support for the motherland and allegiance to the state. This Islam unites around the state. It encourages the faithful to love one's motherland. So something interesting is really going on here. So state, the government sort of create this dichotomy between official and traditional. Traditional is sometimes subsumed under official. Let me see, I think I'm missing one slide here, but it's okay. So it is the kind of Islam that is associated with Dunk, that has an authority to speak on behalf of the Muslims, but it is also the mouthpiece of the state. And this is kind of Islam is decoupled, or it's juxtaposed or presented as different to foreign, the non-traditional, other kinds of Islam that the Kazakh government and the Dunk try to distance themselves from. Okay, and a theme that comes particularly prominent in the past 2 or 3 years is this distancing from this other forms of Islam that are not recognized by the government, that are not recognized by the Dunk, the official, the official religious administration that is backed by the government. And it arose in the context of the rise of ISIS and with the growing number of records from Central Asia, including from Kazakhstan. And I don't know if you've been following reports, there have been a few Kazakh citizens arrested in New York. They were found guilty in trying to join ISIS, etc. So the Kazakh government and the Dunk are obviously concerned with those developments, but they also want to distance from those developments by portraying them as having sources elsewhere, but not in Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan has nothing to do in terms of contributing to those kinds of those forms of radicalization. And the Dunk, the government, they've also kind of renounced those forms of Islam, those kinds of Islam, as not real Islam. So the real Islam is peaceful, it's tolerant, it has a unifying role. It's for unity and peace. Okay. Okay. Again, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna move on because I have more examples when I will compare and summarize all of this. I'm gonna move on to Uzbekistan, where the president, as I've shown you before, has spoken about Islam and all things Islamic, not as frequently, haven't really used as frequently as Nazarbayev, but used nonetheless. And the president has also separated dangerous and threatening Islam from Islam that is portrayed apolitical and even irreligious. But an interesting way in which this apolitical and a-religious Islam is presented in Uzbekistan is as follows. So Karimov has rhetorically refashioned Islam into the composite of traditional values of Uzbeks, rather than religious practices and knowledge associated with Islamic scripture. So this is what I mean by the Uzbek government portraying through discourse Islam as a-religious. So how can it be religion is a-religious? But it is through this refashioning of Islam as the depository of the Uzbek national character that has pre-Islamic roots, as a means of preserving and restoring spiritual values of Uzbek ancestors from generation to generation. So it's like it's just a combination of values, national character traits, rather than a complex system of beliefs and practices. Okay, and it is usually done by making references to the so-called Uzbek forebearers, like scientists, philosophers, poets, heroes, consecrated as saints, and celebrating their achievements in the modern national arts and culture. Okay. So some of the quotes. So and so those like Uzbek forebears, Uzbek fathers, philosophers, poets, they made contribution to Uzbekistan itself, but also Karimov has tried to link their contributions to Islamic civilization as a whole. Okay. Now, in terms of the other contexts in which Islam and Islamic is used in Uzbekistan, just like in the context of, well, let me step down. You can see that this purple color shows that much more attention is dedicated to threatening varieties of Islam. And I would say that the references to Islam in Uzbekistan are much more frequently placed in the context of the discussion of terrorist attacks, militant incursions in the bordering states, and ongoing insurgency in Afghanistan and Pakistan. So the broader discourse has this kind of alarmist and apprehensive tones. So again, it's in the context of, like, you can see that IMU, Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, oftentimes appears in the discussions of Islam as a threat, terrorism. But just like official and traditional Islam is portrayed as a-religious, these dangerous varieties of Islam are also depicted as un-Islamic and a-religious. So the Chief Mufti of Uzbekistan condemned those radical Islamic groups espousing these dangerous views for poor understanding of Islam, and derided their literature as, I quote, absolute nonsense, slander, and obvious distortion of Quranic verses, end of quote. So I'm using these examples because they clearly portray how different stakeholders are trying to claim, assert their authority over interpretations of Islam and defining what's real Islam, what's not real Islam. And interestingly, Islam Karimov has tried to, in 1990s and early 2000s, Karimov tried to link those dangerous varieties to colonialism and communism, but in more contemporary discourse, just like in Kazakhstan, the sources of those dangerous varieties of Islam could not be found domestically. Those can be found in the presence of weak and unstable states in Uzbekistan's proximity, so usually references to Tajikistan, to Afghanistan, etc. All right, and just like in Uzbekistan, just like in Kazakhstan, in recent years in particular, a theme that has become more pronounced in Uzbekistan's official rhetoric concerns the compatibility of cultural Islam with secular, modern, and democratic statehood that is being built there. And this is the kind of Islam that is supported by the state, and this is the kind of Islam that is embraced by the state. Okay, so a quick summary. What I find in this rhetoric of the two governments is that I've tried to sort of summarize them into these images. So on the one hand, the governments talk about traditional Islam, which is also presented as cultural, values-based, it's authentic, it's real, it's pure, it's a-religious, apolitical, it's a source of unity and concord, it harmonizes with the historical traditions of those states and societies, and it's tantamount to values in Uzbekistan. Then, through the mouths of the official religious administrations and through the mouths of the government, they also talk about Islam that is official. By the way, these categories are not all-encompassing and exclusive of one another. So, for example, official Islam embraces traditional, and this is something new because if you look in 1990s, the official religious administration, they kind of tried to present what they profess as different from traditional Islam. But nowadays, there is much more of a movement towards kind of claiming authority over both official and traditional. By the way, the content of either one is never really articulated or clearly defined in the discourse. So there's this official Islam, which is also apolitical. It is supported and overseen by the state and religious administration. There is foreign, which is dangerous, radical, a-religious, intolerant, and moderate, which is consistent with secular democratic state. again, those are just the categories that I am suggesting. Those are the images of Islam that are transmitted through the official discourses of the two governments. Okay? So, moving on to the framework. So, if you remember, instrumentalization of Islam is taking place because it serves some political uses, it serves some political purposes. Islam is presented in one way or another out of political expediency to allow the stakeholders to get something. So, and here, so this figure, or yeah, this figure connects those various images to the political uses or purposes that I think those discursive representations of Islam serve in the context of the two states that I chose for the analysis. So the traditional Islam is used as a part and parcel of this government's effort at nation building. Even in Kazakhstan, where you have fewer Muslims than in other Central Asian republics, the Agency for Religious Affairs proposed the concept and development of modern Islam in Kazakhstan that is premised on the idea of one nation, one religion. And the purpose of this policy, one nation, one religion, is to prevent the so-called dangerous practice of building mosques along ethnic lines. So what the governments do is that instead of really looking for and articulating some common basis of national identity in this multi-ethnic and multi-confessional, polyconfessional states and forging this unity through practical measures, they assert harmony and unity among ethnic groups by cementing this unity through appeals to a common Islamic tradition. What this Islamic tradition is, the content of this Islamic tradition is not made explicit. Okay, and so when government, and the governments also claim the right to defend this constructed unity through state support of this traditional or official religion. So some of you may wonder, how is that the governments are just, free to do what no secular state should be doing, such as controlling religion, determination and qualifications for clergies, censoring religious literature and information, setting the parameters for theological discourse? How can a modern, progressive, secular state engage in those kinds of practices? But the governments claimed their authority to be able to do that because discursively they've created that image of an official/traditional Islam that serves this important purpose of creating national unity, and they, as leaders and the governments that they lead, have the authority to protect, to defend this unity. And then, just like I explained that, so the image of official Islam is used for justifying the regulations of religious practices under the guise of the secular state. And then you have foreign radical that is used for justifying a variety of non-democratic measures. Those of you who are familiar with the notion of securitization, it comes out of the Copenhagen School of Security Studies. So it is a process when a government or another stakeholder creates a new understanding of something that is not inherently a threat. So Islam, there's nothing inherently threatening about Islam, but through discourse, an image of Islam as dangerous and threatening can be created. And this discursive process is extraordinarily powerful because it allows the government then to claim authority for using extraordinary measures, extraordinary policies that go far above and beyond anything that would be allowed if Islam was not portrayed as threatening. So securitization of Islam gives security agents authority to apply urgent and exceptional measures that fall outside of the typical political processes to deal with the discursively created threat. So it just frees the government's hands to utilize measures that are illegitimate So the discursive framing of Islam as foreign, radical, alien, threatening allows the government to justify their harsh, brutal security measures before their own population, but also in the eyes of the international community. And lastly, the modern or moderate allows those states to continue laying claims to being modern, to being democratic, to being secular, and embrace Islam as part of their cultural tradition, as part of their national character, values. So, yeah. And and the overarching purpose of the instrumentalization of religion is to assist the Central Asian governments in safeguarding their power grip and denying authority to religious and secular opposition. One important note that I forgot to mention is that I focused on the instrumentalization of Islam by the governments, but the governments are not the only stakeholders who can manipulate the contents of religion. It could be other religious groups, religious leaders, and Islam is not the only social phenomenon that is amenable to instrumentalization. Ethnicity, nation, those are a couple of other examples that come to mind that can be instrumentalized, which is manipulated through discourse for accomplishing particular political goals. Okay. I'm almost done. So, why am I, again, going back to why am I doing all this? Remember that I began by raising this question as to how and why religion can play these multiple conflicting, contradictory roles in society. And I used Islam as an example of how it can be simultaneously dangerous, threatening, but also apolitical, irreligious, and a source of unity, and a source of peace, and a component of harmonious relations of all the ethnic groups, etc. So, how is that possible? So, let me return back to this question. So, where do I see, my contribution to understanding the role of religion in social and political relations? So, today, scholarly and political communities agree that religion matters, and I don't think anyone will dispute that. Religion matters. However, we still, I believe, lack understanding as to why and how it matters, and under what conditions it is likely to bring division or unity, and violence or peace. So, what I've tried to show in my research and in this presentation is that religion, Islam, and religious discourses that constitute it are forms of political authority in their own right. So the discursive representation of religion are examples of the so-called soft power or world-making power exercised through the creation, dissemination, and production of specific meanings with embedded evaluative and normative content. Again, so discourse is extraordinarily powerful because it says what it is, thus excluding everything else from being called Islam, or being called Christianity, or being called evangelical Christianity, or whatnot. It has evaluative content. It's bad, it's good. This framework, I could have dichotomized it. Three categories, three used before to be real and good, or kind of in that spectrum of good things, and another one is not real and bad, so we could easily dichotomize it. So these discursive images not only render intelligibility to a phenomenon of religion, so through discourse we understand what religion is all about, but they also serve as the instruments of social control and regulation. And this is extremely important. So the discursive representations of religion are the instruments of social control and regulation. So the various representations of Islam are interwoven with forms and patterns of political authority. Okay? So when we see contestations over Islam between like a secular state and religious groups, or between different religious groups, that are very, very common nowadays. So those are not merely the conflicts between various religious or secular and religious groups, but those are more down-to-earth, struggle for access to political power and the economic privileges that go with it. Religions become legitimizing instruments in the hands of the rulers in need of popular support, as well as in the hands of those challenging the existing political and religious institutions and assumptions that underpin them. Very briefly, implications, especially policy implications. So those are more like theoretical conceptual implications, but I think there are also important policy implications. So there is clearly this discrepancy between Muslim self-representations and official representations of Islam. So those of you who studied, read about how diverse, complex Islamic beliefs and practices in Central Asia are, will clearly see the mismatch between those very simple, limited ways and empty. They're on the one hand, those representations are empty as far as the content is concerned. So the content is not really established, it's not specific. So there's this this gap may be closing as official discourse dumps down the religion and discourages the pursuit of religious knowledge and education. And to me, this kind of opens up the room for radicalization, because those Muslims who really are, wanting to get the religious knowledge and education are not really getting it, so they're going to turn to, others who are willing to provide that knowledge to them. So instrumentalization demonstrates intrinsic manipulability of Islam. So the governments can utilize Islam as a readily available ideology that provides legitimacy to their political decisions, especially those that involve the use of repression. And by delegitimizing bad Islam, the governments exonerate themselves of criticism and responsibility. And one thing that I didn't put here is that, but I did mention it during the presentation, is that by instrumentalizing Islam, and the government sort of shift the focus of attention from various problems that are endangering the radicalization of religion in those societies. Those sources of radicalization could be found in poverty, lack of opportunities, repressive politics of the government themselves. So those are the true sources of radicalization that does occur. It's exaggerated by both governments and Islamists, but through instrumentalization of Islam, the governments are shifting the focus of attention from the true causes onto something that really has no relationship or has very little association with the problem that they're trying to solve, thus not really contributing anything. If anything, they are exacerbating the problem itself. Okay.
Thank you very much, Maya. Yes.